So today, in continuing our conversation about life and the afterlife, I want to talk about illuminating darkness. I think that people who show tendencies towards different behaviors, for example, well, for the most part, without making generalizations or sweeping assumptions, rejected, unloved, or unappreciated, perhaps as some people were as children, what ends up happening is those children turn into adults who lack empathy, who lack compassion. Those adults who lack empathy and compassion were or may have been, I don't want to use, as we use generalizations, we shouldn't use all or none. We should just use a generalization that is some or often. Such an important part of conversation is not to use sweeping statements, because there's always nuance and to become used to the nuance. But it could be that a child who was unloved or rejected or unappreciated becomes an adult who doesn't have empathy and compassion. Now, I'm going to go a step further. A child who suffers from extreme neglect or cruelty in the hands of someone they think loves and cares for them will inevitably feel unworthy of love. And these self-degrading feelings can grow to such measures of self-contempt and loathing that in the child's mind, the only way to survive is to become indifferent to others, is to become indifferent to others' evaluations, and then by extension, becoming indifferent to others' feelings. So if these sentiments are never countered with love and compassion from other people, the child may completely shut out the external world. Just as they felt that they were acted towards indifferently, they too will become indifferent to others. What's fascinating, and just think about this for a moment, is often, they say hurt people hurt people. It's fascinating that by nature, what happens to us, we do to others. People who suffer from a low self-esteem, people who think that they are unworthy, also believe that people around them are unworthy, have low self-esteem. So just as the person who is loved can love, those who were not loved have a difficulty loving. And they transfer that experience of being despised or abused, heaven forbid, to a despising and abuse of others, heaven forbid. Now, this perspective is not intended as an excuse for a lack of healthy relationships. And it's not an interpretation that's meant to rationalize or to justify any negative behavior. And even though probably as you're listening to me, you're saying that makes sense, which means even though what I'm saying may be valid, still, it is us, it is the individual. Assuming that for the most part we're sane, we have the power to make the final decisions on how we conduct ourselves. One of the issues with the way that Western canon has educated us is that there is an undercurrent of fate in it. Fate means from the time, or according even to Greek mythology, before I was born, I was fated to be this and this, and there's nothing I can do about it. That is the antithesis to Judaism. Freud took it a step further, talked about the inner child, and said there's nothing that one can do about the fact, for example, if they were abused as a child, they may become an abuser. Or they may have various elements that come from what he called the inner child. Once again, the antithesis to Judaism. We believe a fundamental Jewish value is the value of destiny. The value of destiny says like this. And it's so interesting because I'm using two words that so often are interchangeable, fate and destiny. Maybe until this moment, you probably thought they were defined the same. Well, I think it's so important that we separate those two words. And I'm just using them as two words. You can use any word you want. In Hebrew, it's a different word. But fate, meaning that from the time you're born or before you're born, your life is fated out for you and there's nothing you can do about it. Destiny is the exact opposite. Even if you were abused as a child, even if you were neglected as a child, even if your life's trajectory has caused you to experience and go through some of the greatest challenges known to humans, you have the ability to decide your own destiny through your choices. Your actions, what you do, what you say, and even for the most part, what you think. Because remember, we can only think one thing at a time. So if you have a negative thought, you can just change it. So your thoughts and your words and your actions are all yours. They're not you in your essence, but they belong to you. And so you need to, thank you. You need to take responsibility for that which you do. So starting to blame it on your parents or blaming it on your background or blaming it on your nature, that doesn't work in Jewish canon. So even though all the arguments that you can give for fate, they're valid, you have the final decision on how you conduct yourself. According to Kabbalah, it is counterproductive to live a life in a state where you're constantly saying that you are the result of external circumstances and your behaviors are the result of your fate or your circumstance or your upbringing or your environment. If you're always justifying or you're always blaming your circumstances on someone else or something else, then you're missing one of the most incredible values that you have. Why do we have so many psychologists? Because so often it's very hard for us to look at ourselves because our nose is in the way. So we need another person, whether it's a psychologist or a mentor or somebody we trust, to look at us and say, what a psychologist should do is listen and give us strategies to be able to overcome and to be able to find meaning and purpose and to be able to deal with these things. So we're not brushing them under the rug. We're not saying that your childhood never happened. We're not saying the abuse never happened. What we're saying is that the abuse is not the author of your life. The neglect is not the author of your life. You can't use, maybe when you're 10 or 12, or I don't know when the neglect or the abuse happened, then you can say, because you haven't fully developed the ability to discern. But when you're 30, I know nobody here is over 30, so I'm just at 30. So when you're 30, you don't have that ability anymore. You are the author of your life. Your parents aren't the author of your life. People who did wrong to you, they are not the authors of your life. You are the author of your life, and only you. And sometimes it takes an outside individual to be able to help you not push it under the rug, but to be able to deal with it, to grow from it, and to not, as I say often, not to keep it on your forehead, but to keep it right over your shoulder. Because you don't want to forget it, because life experiences and the reason why you went through them, which is a different conversation, is so important. So you need to have them over your shoulder. I always say that if you take them and put them in a beautiful cloth bag, right, and tie the bag and throw it over your shoulder, because every so often you have to grab it from over your shoulder and bring it back. But you can't keep it on your forehead. You can't make it the bane of your existence. You can't live with it and by it every single day. I know that I'm saying something that is harder to do than to say. But I think that's the beginning. It's just to be able to say the thing. So if you have somebody like this in your life, and you, as a caring, compassionate, emotionally stable human being, want to help them, you desire to help them, the best way to help a person, which means you're not their psychologist, the best way for you and I to help that person is to give them what they always needed, to show them through your actions love and compassion, to communicate with them that they matter, and to say it over and over and over again. Because they're not going to believe you the first time, but they will believe you eventually. To give them the basic trust, as some people have called it, to help them build a healthy, well-balanced self-esteem. And that is done through validation and through action. So you model those behaviors because you can't teach those with words, and you validate the behaviors with your words. You model the behaviors and then you validate them with your words. So within standards and a sense of commitment, what you're doing is you're teaching them that they are loved. And if you can, on a spiritual level, you can teach them that God loves them. The reason why I say God loves them, because God's love is unconditional. And yes, I agree with you, Alessandra, that you don't want to become the abused, because abusers abuse. So if you're in a relationship with an abuser, you don't want to be the abused. So part of your emotional stability is creating those boundaries, is creating what we call the gvura, right? Is the boundaries, as Jill so eloquently put it last week. And I've quoted her so many times since. And allowing them through the boundaries to know that they are cherished and valued. And what you're doing is you're bringing light to their darkness. And we know that when you bring light to darkness, you can make that the darkness never existed and the negativity can dissipate.
Rabbi, I'd love an example of that, because so many people that I've encountered, it doesn't matter what example, I don't know how to validate that you matter when I'm still not giving them what they want.
Does someone have an example? Cheryl?
I have an example because I'm living through this right now. My son and future daughter-in-law have been together 15 years. They finally decided to get married. She's Hispanic, came from a Catholic background. When she was abused as a child and as an adult and pregnant with one of her children, she decided to leave. And her parents said, "You can't leave. What would Christ say?" So people in certain cultures stay together even though they're not happy. And so much of what you said, Rabbi, is not just true, but it also leads to judgment. So she, not being loved enough from her family and having that low self-esteem, did in fact pass that on to 4 of her children. And we became the parents that she never had. So we shower her with love. We validate the things that she does and obviously love her children. But she decided to put a tattoo right on her back forehead that says, "Only God can judge me," with a big Jewish star. So go figure, how do I make something of that? She wasn't raised that way, but for the last 15 years, she's lived in a Jewish house. And her last child was with my son, and he was bar mitzvahed. So she lives that life kind of through us. But I think so much of it, even though we totally disagree on how we would do things, she's a last minute, I'm a planner, all of that, I had to learn to just let it go and not say whatever you want, but give my opinion or something and say, "That's great. Is that what you want? Is that how you want to do it? Perfect. We'll all be together." Whatever that is, it's that validation, exactly what you're saying. It's love, it's validation, and it's non-judgment. That's a key to people with low self-esteem. They think everybody around them is judging them because they feel less than. That was my example.
Alessandra taught me something this week, Cheryl, and I want to hear what you think about this. She taught me that using the word non-judgment, which I use so often, is a judgment. So I wonder, I'm not questioning what you're saying. I'm just kind of, as I'm processing what you're saying, I think about that, is that we can never be unbiased. We can never be non-judgmental because we carry a bias, which is ours. So I wonder, I just question mark. Alessandra, please.
So I'm concerned that this consistent validation, which is not always possible, at least this is my experience. You know what I had in my house as a situation allows the abuser to manipulate. And so it's a thin line between, and that's where Jill's Gevurah comes back. It's a thin line between being loving and caring and compliant and negotiable, and finding compromise and actually letting people get away with murder.
I'm going to say something that's, I don't want it to be taken out of context, but a narcissist has a much harder time with this. Some will tell you, a psychologist may tell you that for a narcissist, this is impossible. Not me, but Kabbalah, Jewish values would not agree with that because it's not impossible. It just means that this is probably their life's purpose, and it's going to take a lot of work because they're starting with a -20 instead of at 0.
I'll give you an example of this week, when you said, I really heard what you said last week about tell me more and about validation and all of that. So this week, their father asked Naomi to prepare him a coffee when he would arrive to drop off something. At what time? 11 p.m. Now, Naomi doesn't know how to make coffee. So I told her I would show her, but then what he added was, and no sugar. At which point, all hell broke loose. I'm joking when I say that, but I said, well, what? You know what? It's like, you're not asking a almost 12-year-old to make you coffee at 11 p.m. at night, because that means that I'm going to make it. And you know what? Even though you said, we should acknowledge the presence, with someone who's suing me the way he is, I'm not fixing him coffee at 11 p.m. at night. And that's another example of how, to keep the peace, it's impossible.
Right. Well, you're talking about a narcissist.
I am.
So again, you can't, and this is an important differentiation here, and I'm sorry that you have to go through this, but as an analogy for this classroom, it's an important differentiation where that narcissist, they have to decide themselves that they are a narcissist. And that's a very hard thing for a narcissist to do.
Never going to happen.
But it could happen, because I've seen other narcissists do it.
Okay.
And then they have to be able to go through the process, which means your validation. And that's why I'm differentiating between, and I said before, a somewhat healthy person who needs a little support and help and encouragement versus someone who is unhealthy. And again, that's where, psychology and psychiatry is a very important part of the process. Because sometimes they may need a drug of sorts to be able to start that process.
And you see, you have a young girl stuck in between
yes.
a narcissist and someone who says, nikuda, nikuda, nikuda. Okay.
Well, yeah.
and I felt for her, but she was being manipulated into fixing a coffee for her father at 11 p.m. at night.
So there's two elements here, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but at this point, as an 11, almost 12-year-old, she doesn't have the ability yet to discern. She doesn't have the ability to differentiate, but over time she will. So for now, part of the job of a parent is to instill black and white values, and not to point fingers, just to say this is a value, to try to. And it's very hard. I mean, here we're talking to adults. We're all 30 years old, so we're not 12. And so we're talking to adults. But when you're talking to a 12-year-old, it's a very different kind of conversation. But your job as a parent is to instill values. You don't have to justify or unjustify what she sees. She will see and interpret what she sees. You don't have to. And actually, I would say the opposite. You don't want to legitimize. By the power of a parent is such a powerful thing. A child can hear all of the garbage in the street and it doesn't hit them. If the parent validates it,
Mm-hmm.
that's when it all sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of parents, they say, oh, my child's going to be exposed to this and that. I have to make sure to teach them first. Not always. Not always. It could be sometimes, but not always. A parent has the ability to validate. And so for a child, especially a young teen, you have the ability, because you can have a conversation, to try in your own way to instill values. What they see and what they experience, that's going to happen. And then eventually they'll be able to go back and say, oh my gosh, my mom said that like 30 times, 50 times, 100 times. Oh, now. And it's only going to be when they're in their 20s.
Mm-hmm.
But that's fine. You're planting the seeds now.
Okay. So actually I'm showing her how not to get manipulated by her
Well,
father.
then there's another very complicated value that kind of goes in contrast with this, which I know I'm going to open a Pandora's box with this.
Please go ahead.
But I don't want to. I'm saying this. I don't want to focus on it because we can focus on it at a different time.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the value of teaching a child that you honor your parents no matter what, and that's a very hard value. Again, I know I'm opening a Pandora's box because there's a conflicting value here. You can teach boundaries, but with respect.
Sure. Me, I just said I wasn't going to fix the coffee.
No, but for her, it's a very important thing. She understands boundaries, yes.
Sure.
She doesn't understand nuance, but she understands boundaries. But
right.
But respect. No one said you have to be a friend to your parents, but honor and respect.
I hear you, and I do not teach them to respect him. Also, because I do not speak about him in terms of he's such and such and such and I don't waste my time doing that. I passed that stage in my life. I don't speak about people in case I speak about facts, but and especially with my kids, I do not remove that aura of their father. But I felt very strongly about not fixing that coffee. I was like, okay, I need to acknowledge it. For instance, I did when he saw Yarin driving my car, and he was so excited, and he doesn't have insurance on his car to have Yarin drive. I let him in the car, I let him sit in the front, and I let Yarin drive the whole family. That felt like validation to me. It was respectful. Okay, but coffee, no. But again, sorry, I don't want to speak about me, but since this is the topic of the conversation.
No, I yes, absolutely.
My apologies.
Nothing to apologize. This is exactly the ability to hold two truths. Well said, Jill.
Yes.
Emotional maturity. Absolutely. Cheryl, you wanted to say something?
I do, but I think Jill has her hand raised too. So since you can't see her, why don't you answer her first? Jill? Unless that was from a while ago. Okay, I'll ask my question. In the beginning of class, you were talking about the difference between fate and destiny. And I struggle with not just your definitions, but maybe how I grew up, that everything was fated, that I was going to marry this person, or I was going to get this disease or whatever, that it was all designed for me. Now, even with my free choice, I didn't or couldn't change some of those things. And I I respect to disagree with you. I still think I meet people in my life that I am meant to meet, that I would not have gone someplace to go meet them. To me, that was a fate. I just happened to find this person in my life, and that fits this puzzle piece. You are one of them. There are some other few in my adult life because I was ready to meet these people. So they're not just social friends, they're mentors, or they're somebody. Isn't that fated? I didn't have free choice, and it was an accidental meeting. I put that in the fate category or in the destined to be category. So I'm against the Kabbalistic view is what I'm saying. And it's rubbing in my head, and I don't want to do that, but it is. So maybe you have an explanation I haven't explored.
Thank you for the challenge. I like being challenged because I think that's the way we learn. We learn by having the confidence to challenge. I think there's two elements here that you're talking about. One is nuance. I chose to use one word and you chose to use another word, or use the same word with a different definition. So one of the issues is that the English language is poor, and the English language uses the same love word for ice cream and for your grandma. And it's the same word, love. I love ice cream, I love grandma, which is two completely different words. I hope that you don't love ice cream like you love grandma. And so that's an important thing to remember, the limitations of language. So let me define or redefine what I'm talking about when it comes to fate and destiny, at least from the Kabbalistic perspective. So firstly, the Greeks are long gone, but they left two things which are very much part of our society: the Olympics and the second most read column in the newspaper, the horoscope. The Greek idea of fate is that you can open the newspaper in the morning. Okay, fine. I'm using an extreme example here because, but that, you know, there was a young woman who, a number of years ago, called me up one morning and said, "Rabbi, my horoscope says that I can't go out today. What do I do?" To which I said, "Don't go out." That's the Greek version of fate. Cheryl, your fate, or what you're talking about, is really destiny. And I'll explain why. Because you had the free choice. Let's talk about our relationship. If you call our relationship fated. When I put out an episode on my Kabbalah for Everyone podcast, I only learned this recently, the average episode is getting about somewhere between 20 and 30,000 listens. So let's just go with the lower number. 20,000 people heard the same thing you did. How many people are sitting in this class right now? not close to that, which means you needed to listen to that podcast, and you needed to make the, first of all, you had to make the choice to listen to the podcast. Then you had to make the choice to internalize. Then you had to make the choice to reach out. Every single one of those elements were all part of your free choice. What destiny is going to be the result of all the choices that you make. For example, you could have stayed in bed this morning. You started off this morning saying that you were tired. You could have stayed in bed this morning. You didn't have to be here. Even though you said, "Oh, I don't want to miss it," or whatever reason you decided to be here. But you still, even this morning, even after our relationship of a few years, you still had to make the choice this morning to be here. That's what we're talking about when it comes to choice. That's what we're talking about when nothing there was fated. What was, in your words, fated was what happened once you got here. Because you can't choose what anyone else is going to say. You can only choose what you're going to say. So that's the fate, which we call destiny, which means destiny is the result of the choices that you made leading up to this moment. And now that you have this moment, you can call it a bashert or destiny. It's not that this person, when you were born, was fated out for you. You had to make a lot of choices to be able to get to the point where you could meet and then marry Bruce. Now, the result is that Bruce had to also make choices. So together, your life story is bashert, which means it's the destiny. It's the result of the choices that both of you made. And Hashem decides what happens once you get there. But you still have to make the choice, which means you can't, the single can't say, "What do you mean I'm fated? I'm going to marry this person anyway. So why don't I just stay in bed all day?" And the person one day is going to knock on my door. What's the story? The Disney story, the Cinderella or whatever, they're just going to come and swipe me off my feet. That's it, because it's fated. No, it's not fated. If you don't make the choice, it's not going to happen. If you don't act, it's not going to happen. There's nothing fated about that. It's pure destiny. You see, so take the words out of it. Do you understand the concept now?
A little bit. But somebody would have had to have put Bruce and I together. That was the fate. Us taking the other steps past that.
No, that's their choice.
Okay, I could see.
That's their choice. And it's true, like, as someone who has put people together, we call it God's work because it's a little bit of God's work. But, as many times as I put people together, I still have to make that choice to do it. Even if I have the intuition or the feeling or whatever you want to call it, I still have to do it. And they still have to respond. I sometimes have an amazing idea, and the two of them or one of them will be like, "No, not for me," because they saw a picture or because they saw them for a minute. Or so there's so many factors. You can't call any of that fate. That is all choice. I had to make the choice to make the suggestion. They had to make the choice. Two different people had to make the choice to accept the suggestion. And then think about all the choices they had to make afterwards that in order for that to lead to an engagement or maybe even a marriage. It's a lot of choices in there.
Right. You're right. Okay, thanks.
Bami, please.
So, thank you. So, whatever situation we are put into, this is because like God put us through this situation tests and everything. So is part of our tikkun, right? It's
Yes.
part of our. So, and it's part of our gigulim. So because we don't choose where we are born. We don't choose what kind of tests we have. So all of this is part of God's it's our tikkun. It's something we have to go through. Basically, that's what you say, Rabbi, right?
Yeah, but again, and this is what I'm saying. The same conversation, and this is why it's the same conversation. The same person who is going to say, I'm an abused person, so therefore such and such and such and such, or I was neglected, so therefore such and such and such and such. No, you still need to make the choice. So which means even if it is Hashem's plan, Hashem designed this world to be a world of which we have choice. And choice is not a figment of our imagination. It's not, like a parent giving a 2-year-old choices. Do you want the apple or do you want the orange? That's not what it is. We truly have choice, to the point that where there are people who have done terrible things in this world. And we often will blame God for that. Why do bad things happen to good people? And I'm not answering that question right now. Don't take me out of context.
Okay.
But there's still, free choice is so powerful that people have that free choice to do evil things. That's the power. That's really what it is. Again, I just threw a truth bomb. I don't want anyone taking out of context. I'm not answering the question. I'm just making a statement about how powerful choice is.
Thank you.
I want to read this. My personal belief is that there's a secret meaning to the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, you will love your neighbor as yourself. And if that love, that natural bond or connection is negative, distorted, or damaged, so too there will be an expression to others. In other words, if you will love your neighbor as yourself, that being the nature of things, the very nature of the universe, and the law of the universe, rather than the commandment per se, you might as well love yourself positively so that you can love your neighbor positively. And I think it's a great comment, and I think it's so important, right? Something I say, if you don't love yourself, how can, and so when the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, which means that you won't love them because you don't love yourself. But even if someone doesn't love themselves, we're all biased towards ourselves. We have a natural bias towards ourselves. So you can say, I don't love myself, doesn't mean it's very different than I don't love my neighbor. That's, of course, you have to be truthful and be able to face yourself and be able to ask yourself difficult questions. Thank you for that. It's 10 o'clock already. I can't believe it, or at least 10 o'clock here. I love to hear what you're taking out of today. I haven't heard anything from Celeste. Celeste, why don't you start today? And then you can pass it on.
Great day today. Thank you, Rabbi. Thanks everyone for sharing. I think what's striking me is that it amazes me, it doesn't amaze me, that when I hear other people speak, there's such commonality that I can find in everybody's stories and in my own life, and that kind of weave into these lessons. So I always appreciate the personal examples. And then I just, something had popped into my mind when I was, Cheryl, when you were speaking. I met, my husband and I knew each other when we were 13 or 14 years old. We ran around in the same social circles. The only reason I met him or knew him was because my parents took me away from my family and joined a cult. And they moved me to Iowa, and this is where my husband was born and raised. And even though I knew him since I was 13, I didn't get to see him again until I moved to Colorado, as did he, unbeknownst to me. And then we ended up in the same social circles again. And it was only then that I noticed him. So I just thought, that was the choice. The choice was me deciding to see, what a good man is. And it took me time to learn that. So I just wanted to share that. And thank you, Rabbi. It was I love this idea of fate versus destiny. Oh, look, I just saw Alana pop on. So would you like to share? No? Okay. Kelsey, are you there?
I am. Yeah, it was a great class. I'm still processing some things. I think it kind of struck me about how many people listen to your podcast and how many people actually show up, and that I'm part of that. So yeah, I'm kind of sitting with that and just like the free choice and the destiny. I appreciated you going into more depth about that. And so yeah, I'm still kind of sitting with all of that, I think. Alessandra, are you ready?
I always find it hard to refine the microphone. So I love the last little bit about God, but at the end of the day, we are the one choosing. So you want to go do a good deed, good for you, but you want to do a bad one, be my guest, and kind of put things into perspective to me. And it's true, like how the rabbi says, we always not complain, but how did God let us do that? Well, he gave us free choice with the good and the bad. Maybe more people should make better choices. That's a different story. I'm not sure how that will happen. And on a more personal note, I will request the rabbi for a one-on-one session on how to deal with a narcissist. And I wish we all had the tools, because I think that there are more and more narcissists in this world. And it's a life lesson. And it took me too many years to learn how to make the choice to say, okay, this stops here, at least for myself and my children. Sometimes I wonder, why did it take me so long? I mean, I'm a clever, educated, successful, somewhat woman, and yet I let myself get into that spiral. But surely we don't have the same maturity at 40 something as we have at 30 something. So Rabbi, I think we all have more than 30 in here. At least I would say 35. Apologies.
What do you mean? I'm not, don't put me in an age box, man.
No, listen. So the rabbi said, what was it? The trans chrono. Let's be part of the trans chrono group, of which the rabbi is a spiritual leader. And I felt 35 at 20, and now I feel 25 at 47. But it's not measured necessarily in secular years, could be in God's years. I don't know, but thank you. Always very inspiring. And I will see you from Shinier Sons, I hope, next week. But I will be there. Even in the Dominican Republic, you will be with me on the beach if there's a need. Like Fami, that he's in Florida. And actually, I'll invite him to take the stage.
Thank you, Sana. So maybe I will answer a question, not answer, but give what I think. And for how to deal with bad people. This is from my experience, and I studied this a lot in the Torah and everything. So part of our choice is to protect ourselves. If you think somebody's harming you, you have the right to protect yourself. This is like you have like a terrorist coming in. You want to kill. You have the right to stand up and kill him first. This is how it works. You have to defend yourself because like he's trying to harm you. So that's how I think about all this. Then if he start understand, maybe you can talk. But as long as he is somebody like threatening you, in your family, want to harm you, you have the right to defend yourself. Basically, this is how I see it, and maybe our dear Rabbi can correct me if I'm wrong.
I have a lot to say
Are
on
you
this.
an Israeli?
I'm Tunisian. No, but this is. I mean, I see. Like last time, like this is like, for example, struck me. I watch Israeli news like regularly, right? So I was seeing like and you can see it like in the channel TV E21 or
24.
so you have people like, yeah, you have people like walking in the street and somebody trying to stop them. What do you do? You do them first. This goes to what you said. If somebody tries like to harm you or to harass you or something, you have the right, part of your free choice. You can be a victim, or you can defend yourself. I should defend myself, but I will never be the attacker, never. But if you want to harm me or like this is how I see it, Rabbi.
Mhm. Well, we'll have to go further into this in the future, this concept. Do you want to pass it on?
Yes. So my Shirin.
I think it was Cheryl, right?
Yeah. So I processed like in French, right? So
Did you mean me?
yeah.
Because I can't. Okay. Thank you, Kami. I like your insight about protecting yourself. I'm still pondering with the fate and the destiny thing, so I have to think a little bit more about that and how it relates. And that you're basically saying, Rabbi, that most of what I'm thinking of is destiny, and all my choices I make lead to that destiny. That I always thought it was predestined, that my life was predestined in another life where I signed a contract or something, that I need to learn these lessons. So no matter what choice I make, I thought I was destined to have that end result. I didn't know I could change that end result. So I have to think about that a little bit more. Okay, who has not, that's all I have to say. I loved everybody's stories, and thank you so much for sharing, Alessandra. I can't see names. Oh, Maya, is it Maya? I can't read the name.
Oh, so I think that if
Oh, Marissa?
if Alana wants to say something, or Julian, I think you're the only two that haven't spoken. Oh, Sarah as well.
Oh, and Marie?
I just
Yeah.
got here. I joined in because it's time for Talmud. So
Exactly.
and you know, I can't be in the same room with Alessandra too long. So
Yeah, be careful. Be careful. Be
I
careful.
know.
I want to
It's a danger to you. We're just protecting you.
I want to welcome Sarah to the class. She's been very quiet today, but Sarah, we'd love to hear some words from you.
Hi, can everyone hear me? It's my first
Sure.
time. Okay. Thank you everyone for allowing me to be part of this class. Definitely thought-provoking. Sorry, that's my cat. Yes, while it's a lot of information to process, but I'm very blessed and honored to be here. And I think I have a lot of learning, and there was definitely words of wisdom to take into account. So thank you everyone so much for letting me be part of this, first off.
Do you have a nugget that you that you took from today?
Yeah, actually, my biological mother is mentally ill. And when you're talking about the abuser and the neglect and all that, one of the things I personally find challenging is to honor a parent when there's been so much abuse and neglect and all that. And I think it's still important to do it, even though humanly, like, there's the anger and all that. But I think I think that's a good challenge for me. So I'm going to take some time to, take that into consideration, be like, maybe I can take on this challenge where I choose to still honor that biological mother that I have. But like you said, set boundaries and try to maintain respect and honor, but with those boundaries, of course. And you said something about how you don't have to be a friend, but the respect and boundaries there. So it's very challenging because there's the narcissism, there's the abuse, there's the neglect, there's the whole bag, as you said, that you put over your shoulder, but you take out sometimes. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, definitely a lot to think about and a lot to process. So I think I have a lot to learn. Yeah, that's my nugget for today.
Well, thank you. And Alana,
Nice to
anything?
meet you.
Yeah. Okay. Julianne, yeah, I saw your comments. Besides your comments, anything else? Any nugget from today?
So
Okay.
the bit that follows on is that I was saying that I think that there
Oh, you're cutting out.
may be a way of interpreting.
Julianne, you're cutting out. We can't hear you.
To sort of a universal law in that I saw that concept.
Yeah.
I
That
can try connecting on a fourth device, but I can't
I don't know what happened.
prove this third.
Julianne, we can't hear you,
one.
unfortunately.
I nearly did connect.
Okay.
Excuse me, folks. I'm going to grab my Talmud.
Okay. I think I apologize. Julianne, we'll have to get back to you. But with that, I wish you all, for those of you who have to leave for today, you're welcome. If you're joining us for Talmud, we will start Talmud in a few minutes or in a minute.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Bye. See you next week.